this is written from my perspective. I wrote it. Therefore, it's about me and why I would choose To Kill a Mockingbird, written from my age with my experience. In other words, it's going to be written in a very different voice from how you might write. Don't worry about that. Realize this paper is supposed to be personal, and you are not supposed to mimic my voice. If you start speaking and thinking like me, on one hand, it'll freak me out. On the other, it'll probably delight me, because then I realize that my ability to lead a cult is working. And you don't want to know where I'm going to go with that. So just speak in your own voice. I'll read this to you. This is my selection explanation. I love stories. If asked why I chose To Kill a Mockingbird, the answer may be that simple. I love stories. I also love to think, and that second love has led me to read books and watch films that challenge me intellectually. Through high school and college, I encountered some of the most challenging narrative art. I read Kafka, Burroughs, Andante, and Homer, and I loved all of them. My mind thrilled not only to read, but actually think about what I was reading. I watched the films of Ingmar Bergman, Jean-Luc Godard, and David Lynch, once again loving all of them. For any thinking person, the opportunity to navigate through the labyrinth of Kafka's castle or plumb the psychological depths of Bergman's Through a Glass Darkly is compelling. But sometimes, facing that challenge is just that, facing a challenge. It's a bit like running a marathon. Sure, you want to be able to say you did and feel the physical triumph of it, but most people do not want to do it every day. That's why I leave the narratives which offer serious intellectual challenges for those occasional moments when I am ready for the mental workout. The rest of the time, I love a good story. So, when I'm not reading The English Patient, I'm reading Watership Down. When I'm not watching Mulholland Drive, I'm watching Spirited Away. I had heard that To Kill a Mockingbird was a moving exploration of racism and intolerance, but I also heard that Lee tells a compelling story with which to spread her ideas. The audience which loves the film adaptation of the novel always speaks of the figure of Atticus Finch and Gregory Peck's triumphant portrayal of him. The devotees of the novel talk of its beauty in building real and touching characters and settings. And that's why I chose it. Yes, I want to read a book which says something important, a novel I can be proud to have read, but I also want to lose myself in a good story with people and problems I can see and touch and understand. I want to read a good story, and I think To Kill a Mockingbird will be just that. So if anybody asks me why I picked up that book, this is my 3-paragraph answer to that question. And let's take a look. No, don't applaud me. My head is large enough as it is. Let's take a look at what it's got going for it. First of all, it's a main idea. Could I capture this in a single sentence? Absolutely. Why'd you pick To Kill a Mockingbird? Because it's a challenging book but tells a really good story at the same time. And then the rest of it adds details. Notice that I have examples or references to other pieces of literature and film that I can use to support this on both sides, the really challenging ones and just the good stories. It's written in the first-person perspective. So the question about is it a formal paper? It's a formal paper in the sense that you don't want to make Muggs errors. However, some of the style issues are looser. You may and should use first-person voice. If you're speaking to yourself about yourself in the third person, people are going to look at you strangely. So if Chad's writing a paper about himself and he says, Chad Selnick likes this, and he likes this, and Chad likes to do this, then people are going to realize that he's having a psychological breakdown, and or that he's a major league sports athlete, because they like to talk about themselves in the third person as well. Write it in the first person. Write it personally. You notice that I even used a contraction in there because that's a little bit informal as well. So you can use some of that informal style. But I still want it to be polished. I still want it to be clear. And I want you to be very clear about why you chose the book that you chose. And by the end of that paper, you should know something about the person. Now, this paper, not very personal about me. You don't learn a lot about my history. You don't learn about my family. You don't learn about my experiences. You just sort of learn about my intellectual character. Well, that's part of my character, so you've learned something about me. The way in which I write this tells you that as well. So each of these papers will be somewhat different because all of you are different, and that's the entire point of the assignment. But just make sure that you are, at the end of that paper, answering in detail why you chose the one that you chose. All of you have given me explanation. So I was pulling out of Lizzie the sort of story about the Harry Potter issue and getting the details about the band trip so that she could think about how telling those stories and talking about her personal experiences with those stories helped her make the decision that she has made. All of the questions that I was asking are geared toward pulling that out. And I think that Catherine's story about her grandmother and the recommendation was exceptionally compelling. And I think that that would make a really interesting paper and tell a lot about her and why she chose the book she chose. But let's go back here for a moment. Let's take a few minutes in brainstorming, just generally. Let's not talk about ourselves specifically, but from our discussion through this class period, what's the answer? What are the answers to this question? Why do people choose the books they read? Abby? Suggestions, so recommendations from others that we trust. That could be a reason you chose your book. What else, Zach? Film adaptations. Often hear of students reading their IRA books because they like the movie. Hunter?
Like its popularity. Like
Good.
It was on the New York Times.
Mm-hmm. Or Oprah's book club.
Yes.
Right, which I knew was what you were really thinking. Yeah, Philip.
Random?
Oh, random. Totally random. So Abby might be falling into this category of totally random. Yeah.
The cover was colorful.
Nice. Now I want you to pause on that one for a moment. The people who design book covers are very smart. And they make a lot more money than I do. And they do that because they are able to generate book covers which are attractive to specific types of people. Not everybody. For instance, I come up to a Nicholas Sparks book with the cover designed as it is, and it like repels me like a magnet. But you know, I go somewhere toward maybe a Stephen King book, and I think, interesting, I'll pick this up and take a look at it. Those covers are designed specifically to give messages to different sorts of people. So you can take a look at a cover and think, wow, that looks interesting, because it's designed to look interesting to you particularly. What else? Author, that's right. You've read something else by this author before, and you're going to read something else again. Because of personal experiences, maybe? Yeah. There's something in this story that is similar to something that you've experienced in your life. Perfect. That's almost like author, except we're talking about subject matter and format. So, genre. I like science fiction books, so I go for this other science fiction book. Philip? Length, yes. Length. What else? Anything else? Some other people have mentioned before religious faith. Hannah, did that enter into your decision to pick up The Shack? A little bit. So Hannah's dealing with a book that is very strongly religious in its message and its development of character. So that might actually have an effect on, or have an impact on why you choose something. You could also consider career ambitions. You can consider hobbies or interests. And I think in hobbies or interests, I might throw Zach's interest in football and why he's sitting there with a copy of the Winner's Manual written by Jim Tressel on his desk. Because he's interested in football and he's interested in hearing about football from an actual football coach. So, Zach.
Well, the thing is, the book doesn't actually talk about football all the time. It's more or less relating football with life lessons. Like there's many stories told.
Mm-hmm.
Like one of my favorite ones that actually quotes me is the book my dad showed it to him.
Yeah.
It's Top 10 Reasons Why I Swear.
Okay.
And it's an oxymoron thing.
Sure.
Because like, it says, well, one is like, it pleases my mother so much. It shows that I'm a man. And the other
think about profanity.
Yeah, and how it actually does the opposite.
Hey, guys, you know what? Your society right now has programmed you not to think about so many subjects. Don't think about profanity. Don't use profanity. Ignore that profanity exists. Don't think about drugs, because the second you start thinking about drugs, pretty soon you're going to be shooting heroin. That was supposed to be a joke. You're supposed to laugh. So yeah, actually that's pretty interesting, just on a side note, just to think about the use of profanity, to think about when it's appropriate to use, when it's inappropriate to use. We've already explored how Bissinger uses it appropriately. But I'm willing to bet, Zach, that you feel comfortable with a book like that because you know the background of the author is similar to interests that you have, and so he's kind of speaking a language and living in a world that you like. So Tressel may be applying his lessons of football to other aspects of life, but he's taking a world that you like and he's seeing the rest of the world through those eyes. And so you're interested in that. Yep. Perfect. Perfect. That's exactly what you should be exploring. Any one of these or more may enter into your writing. So be sure that you're very clear about why you chose your book. I expect to read out of 25 students 25 different papers about 25 different people. The strength of the individual reading assignment is that everything is so unique in this. You're not all writing a rhetorical analysis about a chapter in Friday Night Lights. And trust me, if you find those dreadfully dull to write, I find them dreadfully dull to read. Because really what we're doing there is we're generating skills, and you're training yourself as a writer and a thinker, but you're not doing anything that's really unique and individual and you. So take this paper and sort of make it your own. Talk about yourself. And hopefully that will start the IRA off well, and you will see that this entire project is about using good writing and thinking skills basically to talk about you and your own life. That's about it. Any questions? No? Good? Yeah.
When we read it, do you want us to tell about the book itself?
As much as you'd like. Some of you have read your book. Some of you know very little about your book. So however you want to bring that in. If you look at the assignment, it does ask you to address what you expect to find in the book. But, you know, in my To Kill a Mockingbird paper, I brought that in a little bit. But there's very little of To Kill a Mockingbird in my paper. Just a little bit of an indication of what I expect. Anything else? Yeah, you're going to have to write about how randomly you did it. Maybe even tell a little bit of story about when you made that decision. Abby, help me out. Why'd you do it so quickly?
Because it was when we were in the library,
Uh-huh.
and I was done explaining blue box, and I started looking at the list, and I found my first pick was a different one,
Mm-hmm.
but this one, it was just kind of like the scroll for a little bit, stop, where's my brand? Because it was my second pick, you know.
Here's something you can reassure yourself with, Abby. Even though my paper lasted approximately 400 words, the minimum requirement is 2.
Okay.
So you may be, it might not be as daunting as you think.
Big paragraph or too small.
Correct, correct. So you'll be okay with it. This is not supposed to be a gigantic essay. Any further questions? Yeah.
Are you allowed to be like kind of, I don't want to say random, but like way off topic and float in, or like?
As long as you can tie it back. Katie, this is one of the areas where I will expect you to be sort of on task with writing, is I want everything to develop around the same basic idea. So like I said, even though this is not a formal literary analysis claim or anything like that, there should be basically a one-sentence idea that everything relates to. And I think you saw that with mine.
Do you have to pick like, if you pick like one of like these areas
Uh-huh.
to talk about, can you pick like a couple of them and come together?
Absolutely. Yeah, that would be perfect. In fact, I think that genre and personal recommendation connected in Catherine's. So she's talking about her interest in dark and twisted stories and then her grandmother's recommendation, and those two melded perfectly together. Anything else? Okay, you've got a week, so finish it for next week. In the meantime, focus on a separate piece.